Okay, welcome to this explainer. Aviation is statistically the safest way to travel, hands down. But when the unthinkable actually happens, we're all driven by this singular, vital need to understand exactly why. Today, we're breaking down a highly technical and honestly devastating aviation mystery that completely shook the world. We're going to reconstruct the tragic events of Air India Flight 171, examining the crucial data, the seriously bewildering clues left behind, and the massive, intense investigation that followed.
So let's dive right into this. Picture this. It's June 12th, 2025. Just a regular Thursday afternoon at one of India's busiest airports in Ahmedabad. A Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which, by the way, is one of the most advanced commercial aircraft in the world, is taking off for London. But literally seconds after lifting off, the aircraft struggles to gain altitude. It loses lift, plummets, and, engulfed in flames, crashes to the ground. The fundamental question driving our entire explainer today is simply this. How does a state-of-the-art aircraft simply fall from the sky?
Section 1. The tragic crash of Flight 171. Before we get into the mechanical nuts and bolts, we really have to acknowledge the devastating human reality here. Flight 171 didn't just crash into an empty field. It struck a medical staff hostel that was housing doctors and nurses. And amidst that absolute chaos and inferno, out of the 242 people on board that London-bound flight, the number of survivors was an astonishing, almost impossible 1. A single British passenger named Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, sitting in seat 11A. He literally woke up amidst the wreckage, unbuckled his seatbelt, and just walked out through a rupture in the plane's fuselage. This solitary survival sparked an immediate question for everyone. Why him? Was it because of his seat? Well, experts confirm there's actually no inherently safe seat on a plane. Survival depends entirely on the angle and the physics of the impact. Ramesh was incredibly lucky, but he was also deeply grieving. Because while he miraculously walked away, 260 other people tragically perished. That includes his own brother seated just a few rows away, an entire British family returning from an Eid holiday, and 19 people on the ground.
Section 2. Black Box and Initial Investigation.
In the immediate aftermath of what became the deadliest crash in a decade, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau rushed to the 300-meter crash site facing just immense, unimaginable pressure. Their very first, absolute most critical mission was securing the wreckage and locating the black boxes before vital evidence was compromised by the massive emergency rescue operations happening right on top of the debris. They were on a strict 30-day deadline to deliver an initial report to the world. Everything was at stake here. The Indian aviation regulator immediately grounded all other Boeing 770s in the country just as a precaution. Meanwhile, flight simulator experts frantically programmed the 787's exact flight parameters, recreating the 80-knot takeoff roll to see if they could replicate the exact moment the physics of the flight went catastrophically wrong.
Section 3. Crucial Clues in the Wreckage. Now, what's really interesting about the investigation is that the first major breakthrough actually came from a 17-year-old aviation enthusiast who filmed the plane moments after takeoff and uploaded it to the internet. That viral video became an instant, absolutely crucial piece of evidence. The first glaring clue from that footage, the landing gear was unretracted. Normally, pilots pull the gear up seconds after liftoff to reduce drag. The fact that the wheels were still down heavily implied that the crew was hit by an overwhelming, immediate emergency. They were so desperately focused on just keeping the plane in the air that routine procedures, like retracting the gear, were completely abandoned. But the video showed something even more chilling underneath the aircraft: the deployment of the ram air turbine, or what's known as the RAT. It's this tiny emergency propeller that drops down to generate backup power. And here's the thing. The RAT is specifically programmed to deploy in only 3 catastrophic scenarios: total electrical failure, total hydraulic failure, or dual engine failure. That right there pointed directly to the 787's massive GNX-1B jet engines. Now, the basic mechanics of these engines are actually pretty simple. Suck, squeeze, bang, blow. Air comes in, gets compressed, ignited, and exhausted to create massive thrust. Air India reported one engine was brand new and the other wasn't even due for service for months. Yet, inexplicably, these engines just stopped producing the explosive thrust needed to keep the plane airborne. So what on earth happened?
Section 4. The Deep Fuel Switch Mystery. The answer finally arrived 30 days later when data extracted from those heavily protected black boxes unveiled a bizarre, frankly mind-boggling sequence of events. The mystery wasn't about a mechanical explosion or a bird strike at all. It was about the fuel switches. Let's walk through this terrifyingly tight timeline. At 1:38 p.m., the plane takes off. By 1:42 p.m., they hit a maximum speed of 190 knots. Just 1 single second later, the data shows the fuel supply to engine 1 was cut. 1 second after that, fuel to engine 2 was cut. 26 seconds later, the pilots issue a mayday call, and just 6 seconds after that, they crash. In mere moments, the fuel switches on the central console were inexplicably moved from run to cut off. And this is where the cockpit audio gets really intense. Amidst the absolute chaos of losing all engine power at barely 600 feet in the air, the cockpit voice recorder picked up one pilot urgently asking the other this agonizing question: "Why did you cut it off?" This shows the exact chilling moment one pilot realized the fuel switches had been flipped, literally starving the engines of fuel. And the response from the co-pilot was equally chilling. He simply states, "I didn't do it." This brief, frantic exchange establishes the absolute core of this entire mystery. I mean, think about it. If one pilot didn't do it and the other pilot didn't do it, how in the world did two separate engine fuel switches physically or electronically move to the cutoff position during the absolute most critical phase of flight? Section 5. Man or machine? Who's responsible? So the crucial point here is that we are left with a massive whodunit between man and machine. As the official investigation moves forward over the next year, investigators are forced to neutrally examine two vastly different, fiercely debated theories. First, pilot error. These fuel switches aren't just simple toggle switches you can casually brush against. They actually require a deliberate pull, turn, and push to lock into the cutoff position. But both pilots were highly experienced. The captain was literally an instructor with 8,200 hours of flight time. Intentional sabotage in a scenario like this is incredibly rare. The second theory, software error. The Dreamliner is a fly-by-wire, heavily computerized aircraft. The physical switches simply send electronic commands to computers, which then tell the fuel valves to operate. So, could a digital glitch have triggered a catastrophic shutdown? This debate gets further complicated when you dig up a certain document from the past. Back in 2018, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, issued a very specific warning to airlines regarding these exact fuel switches. The notice basically warned that some 787s might have been assembled without proper locking mechanisms on these switches, which could potentially allow them to be accidentally bumped into the cutoff position during flight. And the regulatory timeline here only adds to the confusion. Following that 2018 warning, the FAA didn't actually make the fix mandatory, and Air India didn't proactively check their fleet. Then, tragedy strikes on June 12, 2025. Yet, remarkably, on July 11th, literally a month after the crash, the FAA issues a new notice declaring that the switches were actually safe, regardless of whether that locking mechanism was present or not. We also have to view all of this through the lens of recent aviation history, because we've seen this play out before. In the 2018 Lion Air and 2019 Ethiopian Airlines crashes involving the Boeing 737 MAX, the initial blame was heavily placed right onto the shoulders of the pilots. It was only after deep, grueling investigations that the true culprit was revealed: catastrophic flaws in the aircraft's MCAS software. Section 6. Unanswered questions and the path forward. That historical context really casts a long shadow over Flight 171. The initial 15-page report provided us with crucial data, sure, but it yielded no actual conclusions. This sets the stage for a meticulous, year-long official investigation that has the entire aviation industry holding its breath right now. Adding immense pressure to this are the voices of industry whistleblowers. Former employees like Ed Pearson have publicly testified before the U.S. Senate about severe production issues at Boeing. We're talking staff shortages, excessive overtime, and a real lack of stringent quality control on the assembly line. Testimony like that forces investigators to heavily scrutinize the manufacturing process of the specific Dreamliner involved in this crash. But listen, as all these technical and political debates rage on, we must ground ourselves back in the immense human cost. For the families of the victims, the aftermath wasn't about debating software glitches or switch mechanisms. It was about an agonizing 16-day wait. Because of the sheer intensity of the post-crash fire, investigators had to painstakingly match DNA samples from relatives with tissue, bone, and dental records, just to return the 260 victims to their grieving families for their final rites. And that brings us to the ultimate question that completely hangs over the future of air travel. When the final investigation report is published a year from now, where will the definitive blame fall?
Are they going to point to a tragic, unprecedented human error in the cockpit? Or will they expose a hidden, fatal flaw in our modern reliance on highly computerized fly-by-wire aircraft? Until then, the true cause of Air India Flight 171 remains an incredibly dark mystery.